So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Azra Giladini, Technical Account Manager here at SOCRadar Cyber Intelligence. Our topic today is how to build a holistic cyber threat intelligence strategy, and we're focusing on dark web vulnerability and phishing intelligence. We're presenting this webinar together with our partner Elasticito, a cyber risk specialist company located in UK, but with a large global presence as an advisory firm and solution provider for cybersecurity automation technologies. Now, a little bit about us. SOCRadar has a digital risk protection platform that helps organizations protect themselves against cyber attacks. We offer a unified solution with many valuable services and features to help companies learn their attack surface and keep up with emerging threats. Our presenters today are Andrew Brown from Elasticito and Ertuğrul Kara from SOCRadar. But before I hand the mic to our presenters, there are a few quick notes I'd like to add. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so if you have a question to our presenters, please submit them in the Q&A window anytime during the webinar, and we'll go through them at the end of the session. Also note that questions are viewed only by the presenters, and if you want to be privately contacted, please indicate that in the question. Now, final note, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to this recording will be sent to all attendees early next week. Now, I leave the scene to our presenters. Andrew, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Azra. I'm Andrew Brown, the CTO of Elasticito. We are a cyber risk specialist organization that operates throughout Europe and Africa. And it's a pleasure to be with Ertuğrul and Azra today and SOCRadar on this webinar. Ertuğrul, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ertuğrul Kara. I am the VP for Product Marketing here at SOCRadar. A little bit on the background, I have a major in aerospace engineering. Prior to joining SOCRadar, I have been a part of some security startups for around 10 years, integrating and implementing security gateway appliances, designing solutions, mainly in Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So let's get started. Today, Andrew and I have a presentation for you about building a holistic CTI strategy by discussing goals and priorities, as well as some specific use cases of cyber threat intelligence. So we are going to get into this, and as you know, SOCRadar is responsible for providing actionable and finished cyber intelligence, and also for identifying blind spots to the SOC teams of companies. And what we really want to do today is bringing some of that perspective to you, sharing and discussing the cyber risks to consider within your cyber threat intelligence programs. So our roadmap for today, we are going to talk about common mistakes, also best practices around defining goals and priorities, while building a CTI strategy around actionable alerts, and then dig into the three most common use cases that needs to be addressed from a holistic perspective: deep and dark web monitoring, vulnerability intelligence, and phishing. We'll also talk about the common blind spots or easy spots that threat actors oftentimes leverage. Going forward, so let's talk about the holistic approach and what can prevent us from this approach. What are the common mistakes? So we are going to pose this question up front because it's going to be the point of conversation here for a little bit. Before we go further and move on to goals and priorities and start building the whole structure, I would like to point out some common mistakes regarding CTI strategies. I think it would be relevant to start with threat feeds. Thread feed is simply a stream of information solely focusing on IP addresses, domains, hashes, to be associated with some kind of malicious activity. Reliability is the main issue with feeds, and oftentimes it's not tailored to your company or industry, which may create lots of false positives. Of course, thread feeds can improve your existing security mechanisms. However, without context, if we put this in the center, I would argue that our strategy would be complex, and we would miss the benefits of a holistic, actionable intelligence perspective. So context is the king. The second common mistake is to get things running without an ability to operationalize. So how would a SOC team benefit from the CTI output? Is the value measurable? Would there be other stakeholders within the organization who would benefit from this? These are some of the questions we need to answer first to improve the outputs. And making it relevant to executives, business stakeholders, as well as SOC analysts and vulnerability teams is essential. Also, red teams are increasingly taking advantage of CTI technologies to accelerate OSINT, open source intelligence, to gain an initial foothold into the environment. Moving forward, the third common mistake is ignoring human around AI hype. So one silver bullet with a high confidence level would be perfect. Obviously, machines can do the heavy lifting in terms of automated data collection, and AI can take a role in the analysis of this massive data. That's actually what we do here at SOCRadar too. However, the practices until now suggests we still have time to fully automate many processes, including analysis, adding context, and action toward relevant alerts. A holistic CTI strategy should avoid this hype and focus on how to improve human operator to add better context to the findings. Overall, we need to avoid being complex and cumbersome, better be actionable. Now, we can move on to defining goals and priorities that will shine a light on our way. So at the end of the day, what we would like to achieve is well-defined goals. If we can build a holistic cyber threat intelligence strategy, we would make better informed decisions. We would minimize the risk of an attack from a proactive standpoint, and we would limit the impact of successful attacks by improving our current security posture. So goals are almost the same, independent from the company or industry. However, priorities may differ across a variety of industries. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit on that and use cases. So for obvious reasons, yeah. So a little bit technical issues, yeah. So for obvious reasons, we need to prioritize use cases because we have limited sources. Also, another reason is that security teams are already overwhelmed with alerts. We wouldn't want to add more alerts to analyze. The most common use cases of CTI operations are laid out on this slide, from dark web monitoring to APT group activity tracking or fraudulent method detection, vulnerability intelligence, all listed here. We will talk more on these in a couple of minutes. It's worth noting that a priority level of the use cases may change along the way. So keep it flexible. This is expected when you consider the digital transformation that organizations are going through, especially after COVID. So I'm going to give you one good example. It's a globally well-known insurance company that I know. Within their loyalty program, they are now utilizing digital e-commerce platform where you can buy anything, so online. This makes their risk mapping a little bit complex. That will definitely affect the CTI strategy as well. Now I'm going to give you some statistics extracted from SOCRadar platform just to help you define and then better prioritize the challenges to address with CTI. You know, being data-driven is the key to build a solid strategy. So let's speak with data from SOCRadar platform. Here on the horizontal axis in this chart, you can see the types of threat intelligence alerts. On the vertical axis, you can see the number of alerts that SOCRadar platform has generated so far. And the alerts counted here are only the actionable ones which have been vetted by threat intelligence analysts. So we can say that false positive rate is close to 0. Over the 1-year period, based on the statistics from our platform, on this bar chart, you can see that major type of alerts for organizations in banking industry is phishing and brand impersonation. So it's followed by compromised employee login credentials, which is directly related to the number of employees you have. After that, we see stolen credit card alerts, which is also expected. But then you can see SSL issues, which is interesting and directly related to attack surface visibility. So did we address that within our CTI strategy? Remembering the goals we defined earlier, maybe we need to, if you would like to minimize risk of, hacking simply. And then the last one is deep dark web findings, which can be also expected. These statistics on this chart is suggesting that for an organization in finance and banking industry, these use cases should be addressed and prioritized. So what applies to other industries may not apply to your industry. Moving on to the next industry, you will better see the difference across industries. So the next industry we will point out is e-commerce. There appears to be new alert types like critical ports, such as RDP, SMB, etc. And major alert type is customer data. This is not too interesting since the credential stuffing attacks are increasingly happening due to password reuse habits of consumers, as well as lack of two-factor authentication. Hackers are frequently sharing brute forcing and account checker tools in the dark web forums, as well as exchanging some new methods in the marketplaces. Phishing comes next, which is also not surprising since consumer-facing businesses are oftentimes targeted by phishing attacks. Here we see that one priority for an e-commerce company needs to be getting to know if their customers' login data or other PII, personally identifiable information, have been breached. So this can have serious ramifications from data privacy and the regulations like GDPR perspective. Going forward, another industry, we see here the statistics for insurance industry. Here you can see that SOCRadar is oftentimes generating compromised employee credential alert, including data stolen either from malware, bot infected devices, but through some info stealer malware, or through credential stuffing attacks simply. So followed by SSL issues, and at the last data point, you see critical vulnerabilities, which is related to attack surface monitoring, like critical ports. This was not among top 5 alert types for the other industries, worth noting that. And deep and dark web findings, again, hit top 5, into which we will discuss more in detail now. All right, so far I have been talking about how we can define goals and priorities. I think those industry-specific statistics would give us a good foundation of where to start from. And now let's be more specific by digging into use cases and how we can address today's security challenges. And let's start with deep and dark web. We are gonna take a closer look on some sample findings from dark web. So we will know which threats are emerging. Some of them, would sound pretty interesting. So let's start with a 0-day. So a threat actor here is selling a 0-day vulnerability for SolarWinds, which has been recently hit by a disruptive cyber attack and can affect, thousands of organizations all around the world. This has been posted on a Russian-speaking dark web forum. It's just a claim at this stage, but still worth considering. Tools are oftentimes shared by threat actors. Credential stuffing and brute force tools especially are popular. The threat actor here is claiming that the tools that he provides can be used against some well-known global banks. Health-related data like PII is juicy target for cyber criminals. Unfortunately, they have no ethical concerns. Here, a threat actor is selling COVID-19 test data, including email, password, date of birth, and phone numbers of patients of a testing diagnostics center. Another one, network access for sale, is one of the most common in the dark web forums. Here, a threat actor seems to be auctioning an RDP access to an oil and gas company with $9 million revenue. RDP is frequently targeted due to its vulnerabilities, and also that's wormable. And here is an interesting one. This is one of the emerging dark web threats right now. Threat actors are selling access to stolen data to their own cloud of logs. Seems like the cyber criminals are, keeping up with the trend of cloud. They try to maximize every bit of data that they steal. And it's worth emphasizing that it's only a matter of time before we see this new market evolve into something that could expose organizations from all industries to greater risks. Every day, in conclusion, every day, thousands of these kinds of posts are shared on black markets, hacker forums, cyber criminal marketplaces, and one would easily drown in this massive information stream while searching for a specific target. So clearly defined goals and methodology would prevent this. Now we will move into the methodology to remove noise and find out the real risks. So automation, sources, and human intelligence are three essential parts of an effective deep and dark web intelligence methodology. Through the fusion of these, you can get valuable insights, which makes you feel more confident on upcoming threats. Automation applied with humans will help you contextualize the data. Humans applied with monitoring a broad variety of sources would help improve your visibility into APT and threat actor activities. And this is necessary because when you start searching for some granular details related to your organization, you may have to secure the trust of malicious actors to gain entry into their circles. That's where the truly rich intelligence is. And finally, with the fusion of breadth of and depth of sources with automation would allow you perform non-stop monitoring, and so you can get real-time insights and intelligence. This is the methodology that we follow here at SOCRadar too. Well, now let's move on to the other foundational component of the strategy, blind spots on your attack surface. To gain an initial foothold at the network, threat actors are looking for these on a day-to-day basis. Today's threat actors are more funded and more focused than ever, but the mindset of them is always towards the easiest way in. The first of those easy ways laid out here is compromised credentials of employees or C-level executives. So threat actors are looking for this kind of information. According to the data breach report came out of Verizon in 2019, 80% of hacking-related breach incidents included some kind of use of compromised or reused credentials. Yes, unfortunately, it is still a headache in 2021, and threat actors are kind of democratizing accessing stolen credentials, as we have seen a couple of slides before, cloud of logs sample incident from dark web. Then comes next, the public code repositories like GitHub or GitLab. The risk associated with this already spotted with some major incidents, like the one with SolarWinds sunburst attack. Some researchers claim the actors gained initial foothold by accessing their FTP credentials on an unprotected GitHub repository. And finally, third-party weaknesses and supply chain ecosystem risks. So your CTI strategy needs to be scalable enough to cover your critical third-party vendors. And on top of security rating services, probably you are making use of, actionable threat intelligence should come into play here as well. Now, before passing it on to Andrew, I'm gonna talk about how you can leverage threat intelligence to prioritize vulnerabilities. Ideally, an organization would deploy every new patch immediately, quickly, but in reality, it's not possible. To determine optimal prioritization strategies, you can make use of cyber threat intelligence. Based on our experience, along with a variety of enterprises, it also helps a lot to communicate serious risks to C-level executives, so to decision makers, who would probably get affected by that specific patching process. We recommend two different use cases of CTI laid out on this slide. So both of these challenges can be addressed by a holistic attack surface aware standpoint. One is identifying the exposure of critically important hacker-facing assets, including VPN gateway appliances, SSL, TLS certificates, as well as open critical ports like RDP, MySQL, NetBIOS, MS SQL, these kind of ports. The second point is to strengthen existing patch management and prioritization processes with up-to-date vulnerability intelligence. And this may include tracking the APT groups, dark web, as I mentioned, SolarWinds zero-day exploit for sale in my previous slides, as well as CVE ID mentions out there in a variety of sources like Twitter and cybersecurity news. Simply, this can help vulnerability team analysts understand how and by whom vulnerabilities are exploited. And I would also argue that a CVSS-centric approach will not help here. Up next, I have a good example. So when it comes to drastic consequences of poor attack surface management and wrong patch prioritization, I would point to this piece. This is a really good example. This can replace a ton of time spent into applying vulnerability intelligence. Here, there's a vulnerability with a CVE ID 2019, something starting with 2019, related to Pulse Secure VPN appliances. And it was known to be exploited in August 2019. And if anyone cares, CVSS score is 10. When you look at the date published of this piece, it says August 2020. So after 12 months, a threat actor on a Russian-speaking dark web forum shared the VPN credentials of hundreds of enterprises for free. These enterprises obviously didn't prioritize the patching of this vulnerability for some reason. And probably this is because they have no up-to-date external facing digital asset inventory and inventory of their, in general technology assets because of a quick, a fast digital transformation phase they are going through. So it can be as simple as that. And anyhow, threat actor took advantage of this and performed mass scanning in the IP version 4 space and exploit the servers in a massive manner. And a holistic standpoint of CTI, again, would identify and alert about these kind of gaps. And with that, thank you so much for your attention. I now turn to Andrew Brown from Elasticito, upcoming another important use case of CTI, especially for consumer-facing industries.
Guru, thank you. So what I'd like to discuss today is have a chat around phishing and the phishing life cycle, and how you can use threat intelligence to be able to address the actual whole phishing life cycle, and what threat actors are actually up to be able to complete this, and why they go about doing it. So if we have a look at the whole sort of life cycle, we've put together a bit of a complex diagram here as to how this would work and how a kill chain around phishing would work. But what I'd like to start off with is put this in perspective and say, let's look at phishing. Phishing and why threat actors go after or perform phishing is for one reason and one reason only. They want credentials. So if you make those credentials worthless to them, they don't tend to waste their time around going phishing for those credentials, because they realize that it's going to be a wasted effort. So however you might go simplistically about doing that, or more complex type solutions around stopping it, that is always sort of the best method we'd actually recommend. And we've noticed, okay, if we look at it, the media loves reporting on bad news. It's not so great about reporting on good news. So e-commerce companies out there sit there and they end up in the news for the wrong reasons. People have been using credentials to log into their site and make use of data and stuff like that, or whatever they can get by logging into their site. I use a lot of online sites for my grocery shopping, to buy various things online. And what always strikes me when I go into these sites is the fact that it only requires a username and password, specifically my email address, and then a password. We all have so many passwords, nowadays, and not everybody understands how to save them securely, look after them securely, and therefore sits there and says, I'll have only one password. But in addition, these online portals don't even offer the basics, okay, of two-factor authentication using something like Google Authenticator or an Authy app to enable you to secure yourself. But at the same time, they're very welcome, and they love turning around and saying, we'll remember your credit card details for you to make shopping a lot easier. So having gone through that exercise, let's look at sort of what threat intelligence can do for you, and how they would look at the phishing kill chain and to stop threat actors acting against your organization. So if we start off on the left, where we've got a really nice red arrow there, and we say, let's start off with a domain. We've called ours loyalty program, okay? .com. And what we're going to do with loyaltyprogram.com is we need to sit there and generate related keywords. So related keywords could come from PR, HR, marketing, legal, okay? Each of those departments are going to have an input into keywords that could be associated with our actual brand that they want monitored, and that they consider actually important. So let's add those into the actual mix with our domain, okay? And then in addition to that, there are various ways of looking at that brand name, okay? Things like Punycode, okay, missing dot, okay, repetition, transposition, replacement, omission of various characters. And when we sort of put that all in a complete mixing pot here, what we've managed to do with the domain and all of these variations is we have 100, 200, 300, depending on what we've managed to put in place, okay, different combinations of what we're looking for, or our keyword pool. Also remember that the shorter your domain, so if I have abc.com, the chances of keywords showing up And the ability to manage this becomes a lot more complex because there's just so much of it out there, because your 3 letters could very well form part of lots of bigger types of sort of domains. So while it's nice to have a 3-letter domain, it makes threat intelligence a lot more complex. So something like loyaltyprogram.com is great, but just to give you an example, if we apply the sort of English spelling to loyalty program, we could have an MME on the, or make it program with double ME.com. And, you know, that's one way that someone would look at adding to this actual domain, and one of the data sources we should probably look at. So once we've sat there and we've generated this whole keyword pool, what we want to do is then examine various data sources out there to see what the threat actor is doing. So in this case, okay, if we look at it, one of the data sources could be, the domain registration right the way around the world, or the who is information, and we can look for newly registered domains. Now, that again is going to generate quite a lot of noise. And the reason that is going to generate quite a lot of noise is because there could be people out there, depending on the name you have chosen for your organization or your actual domain, legitimately registering items or domain names that are similar to what you have chosen, and therefore they're automatically going to end up triggering something that is in the keyword pool. So that's one area there, is looking at newly registered domains. We can then look at how the threat actor might actually progress. There could be, as Aturu has mentioned earlier on, open threat sharing platforms, different threat actors discussing, your environment, or how they think they're going about attacking your environment in open sharing type platforms. They could be discussing it on social media like Twitter or something like that. And at some stage, what they're going to end up doing, now that we have things like Let's Encrypt, which enables us to issue certificates quite freely, is they're going to look at possibly getting an SSL certificate registered and issued to make the whole domain look legitimate. They could very well go out and buy a certificate to make it look even more legitimate. So these are data sources that we have to be able to look at what is out there and what threat actors are doing around phishing. So from all of this information we happen to have here, and you can imagine now, this is not possible to manually manage, okay? We have got far too many data sources. This is where cyber threat intelligence starts to, and tools start to come into their own, whereby we now detect a suspicious domain. So what we now need to do is do some analysis and create an alert around that. So what we do is within the SOCRadar platform, this is where our actual physical person analysis comes into play with the use of the actual tool. And what they're going to be looking at is looking at starting off with a who is detailed checks, okay? So, if we dig a little bit deeper into that, did the company register this domain itself? So they might have decided, okay, that they had a .com domain, they're going to register a .co.uk domain or a .de domain to localize it, to, make people feel sort of more of a belonging and create more of a trust around it. So that's question one, is, did they register itself? Has it just been parked, this domain? Is it actually active? Does it have other additional DNS records associated with it? And then if it does have things like an A record and we can see a website's been stood up or something like that, if we look at the design of that website, does it resemble, something similar to the actual organization's domain, because that is what your threat actor is going to do. It's going to try and look very much like you. So if we went and had a look at loyalty programs spelled with 2 M's and an E.com, how many people would really take notice of that if the website actually looked the same? So other interesting information is if the phishing stuff is, phishing is about to take place, is there a login form, okay? Is it going to ask for PII data? Does MX record exist as an, are they ready to start, sending mails? Does it just connect via HTTP and then no certificate registered yet, okay? And then also looking at the register and its origin or country of origin, okay? And without sort of mentioning any names out there, generally threat actors will use registrars in countries, okay, that have a less regulatory or strict regulatory environment, to be able to do this type of thing. So is it looking suspicious? Why would a UK company make use of a registrar, say in, Central America type thing, just as an example, without, naming any names around this. So this is what's happening with the analysis around this whole phishing exercise. So when this suspicious domain is detected, these are the things that an analyst is looking at before an alert is created. So when we see that something looks suspicious, it's not registered by the company itself, okay? It looks like it's been registered in a place that shouldn't be registered, okay? And we can see that in all probability, it's a copy of the official site and official logo. It's like, right, now there is an alert, and the question now is there enough evidence for an actual takedown to take place? So this is then, a discussion with the actual organization, with, ICANN and whoever's going to be able to do the takedown, maybe legal department, etc. And it's a case of start automated monitoring of this. We've detected that there is definitely a suspicious domain here, but how far along the path is the threat actor with the use or about to start using this? So we could have identified this as a newly registered domain, okay, had a look at it, okay, seen that a website might have been stood up that looks similar, but at the moment there's no certificate registered for it, there's no MX records, etc. So it hasn't quite got to the stage, maybe not quite enough evidence for a takedown yet because no one's doing anything, and in which case the monitoring or automated monitoring starts of this, and a change that could be detected here is we see MX records created, or we see an SSL certificate registered, etc, and we continue around this loop and say, now, is there enough evidence for takedown? Absolutely, let's initiate a takedown of this. So this is the whole reason for having cyber threat intelligence around monitoring domains for your organization, looking at your brand, protecting it, but at the same time, okay, asking yourself the question, why is this happening to me? How can I prevent it? And maybe if I sit there and I make some various changes and convince the business that we can put in some type of two-factor authentication, I will render the use of credential harvesting worthless, and in which case, okay, you will see that this dies off, or this activity around your domain dies off. So that's really sort of, just a bit of enlightenment as to why phishing happens, how to build a phishing kill chain, and the associated components that take place, and how cyber threat intelligence can assist you with this. Tarun, anything you'd like to add? Back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. So actually, it definitely shows that threat intelligence is identified based on the business problems. And like we mentioned earlier, based on the industry, the requirements may change, the priorities may change, but phishing will definitely be one of the prioritized use cases, especially for a consumer-facing business in the next probably a few years more. So thank you. So I think we can move on to key takeaways from this webinar. So here are the key takeaways. So we would recommend to embrace a holistic CTI approach, since our goal is simply actually to prevent disruptive cyber attacks from happening. We would recommend to keep it actionable and measurable. So here, actually, we need to underline the actionable part. And we need to identify the priorities considering the industry, as we just mentioned. And it's also very essential that making threat intelligence relevant to executives, business stakeholders, anti-fraud team, security operations, vulnerability teams, incident responders. So we need to make it relevant to all these stakeholders. And lastly, we would not recommend to ignore the blind spots in the attack surface. So we need to keep our evolving external attack surface visible and up to date. With that, I will, before handing back it over to Azra, thank you again, everyone, for joining our session today. Azra, do we have any questions from the audience?
So thank you, Andrew and Ertuğrul. That was a great presentation, by the way. So right now, I don't see any question, but to all viewers, if you're interested to learn about a specific topic after the webinar, you can freely contact us. Okay. So there is no question, so I can go to the closing remarks. Yeah, so before we close the webinar, I'd like to let you all know of a great free tool we are offering to all companies. Here on the screen, you can see a screenshot from Deep Web Sonar, which can be accessed from labs.socradar.com. By providing only your main domain, you can check free of charge, again, dark web exposure of your company, compromised credentials, malware-infected users, and understand the overall dark web risk of your company. If you also provide your corporate email address, you can even download a more detailed report. Now that's all I wanted to add here. You can try the tool to get a better insight. And that's all for the webinar as well. Thank you all for your valuable time. See you in another webinar.
Thank you.